Welcome into the Awesemo.com NASCAR live before lock shows. We're here to get you ready for today's Goodyear 400. Of course, I am Jason Floyd. We are sponsored by Prize Picks. Talk about Prize Picks here later on in the show. Those prop bets that are over there on Prize Picks. Of course, as always, I am joined by the man you all want to hear from. You want to hear his thoughts on today's NASCAR race, Chris Pennell. Chris, happy Sunday afternoon to you for here. Of course, first off, what's kind of your overall thoughts on today's slate?
Hey, what's up, Jason? Looking forward to today's race. I do like Darlington. It's one of my more favorite tracks as far as non-super speedways or short track goes. But we have a really fun slate today. Lots of ways to go. We have two major place differential guys, which we're going to talk about, that are going to garner a ton of ownership. And we have a cheap-ish driver that could dominate on the pole. And just a lot of ways to go. Lots of strategy to be had. And I'm really looking forward to breaking this down.
Geez, I wonder what two drivers you might be talking about that have place differential and might be kind of catering a ton of ownership today. I don't know.
We'll save the good stuff for later. Surprising.
I think everyone knows. I think really probably the question ultimately with that is going to be is, can they be optimal in GPPs as opposed to obviously cash games? I mean, it's going to be hard to not lock those drivers in. We got a cheap play that's getting a ton of ownership today. We'll talk about that one later on in the show, but this is a race where we do have dominator points, over 200 dominator points on the board here today. Obviously we got to find those two. Are you trying to get more than two dominators in your lineup?
So if I'm trying to get more than two dominators, I'm usually looking to a guy like a Tyler Reddick / Joey Logano because of their price points. If you're trying to go triple down with guys like Larson, Truex, and maybe Kyle Busch up top, I'm not sure it's going to be the best way to go. I do think two dom approach is the best, unless you are talking about a guy like Tyler Reddick, who starts 10th, that can get up front and dominate, but also has a little bit of PD upside as well.
Obviously, when we're talking about place differential, I mean, look, we can joke about it, but everyone knows who the place differential guys that people are going to target. It's ultimately at that point because of one of those drivers being Chase Elliott is the second highest priced driver over on DraftKings. Of course, Kevin Harvick a little bit below him. But, outside of those two obvious ones, I mean, place differential is something we're going to have to find a little edge here today.
Yeah, for sure. If it's cash games today, you're going to have to jam in Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick. But in tournaments, if we have two primary dominators, let's say, for example, Kyle Larson comes out, he leads 200 laps or 150 laps, and we see Truex come out and lead around 100 laps, there's a good chance that we're not going to see a guy like Chase Elliott be optimal, because while he has a nice floor of around 60-ish points, if he can get to a top 10, guys like Truex or Kyle Larson could easily surpass the 100-point mark with the dominator points they're going to have. They don't have quite the floors, but their ceilings are very high. Now, as far as Kevin Harvick goes, below $9,000, you do not need him to get up front. So he has a little bit more leeway to be optimal. And that's why I'm kind of landing more so on Harvick in tournaments more than I am on Elliott, just to kind of get to the extra dominators over Elliott in tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, this morning when I was putting together my spreadsheet, and one of the things I kind of thought of is like, man, if I can save that $2,000-ish and go to Kevin Harvick, it is going to allow me from a flexibility in terms of developing my rosters there, whether you're playing single entry 3 max 20 max or a 150 max over there. But of course, let's get into the top drivers here on the slate here. So these will be the drivers who are 9K and above over on DraftKings. So you got Kyle Larson, who's starting second, Chase Elliott starting 34th, Mark Truex Jr. starting 4th, Denny Hamlin 22nd, William Byron 9th, Kyle Busch 5th, Ross Chastain 8th, Alex Bowman 15th, Ryan Bowman 7th, Joey Logano will be on the pole, and Tyler Reddick is number 10. Kyle Larson, and I was watching the video you had yesterday, and I love something you said there is, I mean, look, Kyle Larson has not been the Kyle Larson we saw last year, where last year it was just kind of like, just pop him in. I mean, you think a couple years ago at NBA DFS, it didn't matter what Russell Westbrook was. You just found a way to put him in your lineup. And that was what Kyle Larson was last year, but this is a race that could be really set up for him today.
Yeah, while he hasn't been his most dominant self, it was so fun last year. It was just it was basically just picking 5 drivers, because you always plugged in Larson no matter what. This year, it has not been that easy, but $11,000, he's not quite as expensive as he was last weekend. But once again, everything sets up very well for him. I know kind of said a similar thing to last weekend, but Darlington's a really, really good track for Kyle Larson. He can ride the Highliner on the wall, which is very good for him. He's great at conserving his tires. He was first in the 15-lap run in practice, was still top 5 in the short run, but being first overall after tire wear started to be an issue is definitely a pretty good sign for Kyle Larson here. He has finished runner-up the past 2 races at Darlington. He's got an average finish of second, close to 90 DraftKings points per race. Crushes the similar tracks. Has been overall one of the most dominant cars at Darlington. While he hasn't won here, I think that could change very soon. And I mean, there's a reason he's got the best odds to win this race on Vegas. There's a lot of signs pointing to want to play Kyle Larson today.
And of course, if you're an also a plus member and you look at our top driver tool, I mean, the numbers are just going to pop off the screen at you. Particularly, obviously, he is going to be a dominator that everyone is going to go for. At top 6% is one of the highest top 6% we have on the board here today. It's going to be tough to avoid him. Now, you look at the man that's right underneath him, that being Chase Elliott, starting in 34th, 10,600 DraftKings, 13,000 on FanDuel. I mean, look, he is going to be a chalk play, but I really think that this becomes a question of cash versus GPP. While he's going to be a staple in my cash lineups, GPP, I kind of think of, wasn't William Byron last week that was starting towards the rear, and we were all like, hey, we got to hammer in. And I mean, look, on the surface, you could sit there and say, okay, how does this not be optimal? But when we're talking cash versus GPP, it's 2 different scenarios.
Yeah, it's certainly a similar situation to what we had last week with William Byron. Now, we do have less laps, so it does make Elliott a little bit more viable than we had William Byron last weekend, where we had 400 laps compared to just under 300 this weekend. Thing is, though, Chase Elliott's pretty good at Darlington. I know some of his overall numbers don't look that pretty on the surface. He's had a couple of wrecks here, which have skewed his numbers, but that's just bad luck. You can't really count that against Chase Elliott. Man, starting in 34th, it's really hard not to like him. And he can still be optimal if he doesn't get up front. The thing is, he's going to have to make this like a one-dom race for him to be optimal. So if Kyle Larson can dominate the majority of this race and Chase Elliott finishes like a P8, P7 with some fast laps mixed in, and no one else really dominates a ton, we don't have like a second main dominator, that can be the path for Chase Elliott to be optimal as far as tournaments go. Now, if we see a primary 2-dom race with a Kyle Larson and let's just say Martin Truex in this price range, there's a good chance we don't see Chase Elliott in the optimal lineup. Now, can you still cash lineups with them? Sure. If he can get you 60+ points, you're not going to complain too much with Chase Elliott, but he might not be able to take you down a tournament unless we have a bunch of cheap guys that just absolutely hit, where you can go 3 cheap guys with 3 upper price drivers this weekend. But in cash games, obviously, you're going to lock them in.
Of course, you just joined the show. We're here breaking down today's NASCAR race, the Goodyear 400. Give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up all of our shows, DFF offers, giveaways, and so much more. Of course, once you subscribe, you hit that notification bell so you know when a show is live here on the channel. We got you covered. It doesn't matter what DFS sport. We've got you covered over here at Awesemo.com. Next up, we got the man that will be starting 4th here. That would be Martin Truex Jr., 10,500 on DraftKings, 13,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, he won the first race here last year, and while he wasn't fast in practice, he wasn't that fast in practice last weekend, which I always have concerns when the JGR cars are not fast in practice. But with them kind of having a similar situation to last week, and they ended up being very fast during the race, even though Truex did spin at the very end, I still am going to have some interest here. While he wasn't fast in the short run, I'm more concerned about what he does in the long run. He was 5th in practice, and we know Truex is amazing at Darlington as a recent race winner here. Like I said, last year, close to 75 DraftKings points per race, and usually a contender for the top 5. I think he's an interesting pivot off of Larson up top. Obviously, you compare the two together, but he's going to have roughly, maybe not quite half the ownership, but pretty close to it. Got to have some interest in Martin Truex, I think, in tournaments.
Then we move on to a man that's a well-known name, but has not been the DFS star you would hope he would be this year. That's Denny Hamlin. He's starting 22nd, 10,300 on DraftKings, 12,500 on FanDuel. I mean, and I know you talked about this earlier this week of like, this has just not been the Denny Hamlin. He's got the name value, and you're always going to kind of stick there, but we haven't seen the results that we're hoping for.
Yeah, I wish he was a little bit cheaper. I think like him and someone like Ross Chastain should be kind of swapped as far as their price ranges go. But I still like Hamlin just because of how he looked in practice as far as the long run went. Was 2nd in the 15 lap. The problem is he has been like the most unlucky driver so far this year. Last week, he had an excellent car. He was one of the fastest drivers, if not the fastest car on the track. He came out first in the pits. His wheel fell off, so he had to go to the back. He worked his way back up to the front. Then he ends up getting clipped by Cody Ware of all people. So just the bad luck continues for Denny Hamlin. He's got 1 top 10 finish this year as far as the normal tracks go, kind of backed into a win. Starting in P22, he is going to the rear to start this race. Not like he's that far away from the rear anyway, kind of starting mid-pack. It does hurt him a little bit because he's going to have to work his way through traffic. He's going to be right there with Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick. And at that point, it's like, well, I kind of just would rather get the Chase Elliott instead because he's actually giving me those 12 extra place differential spots. Meanwhile, Denny Hamlin loses that to start the race. If I'm playing tournaments, I want to get some exposure to Denny Hamlin. It looks like the JGR cars might be solid as far as the long run goes. We know Hamlin can conserve his tires pretty well typically, so I'll get some in tournaments. But if he's going to come in around, let's just say, for example, he comes around 25%, I'll be a little bit lower on that.
Next up, you've got William Byron. He's starting ninth, 10,100 over on DraftKings, 11,000 over on FanDuel.
So I'm usually one that likes William Byron just about every single week, and his car looks amazing this weekend with the throwback scheme that we have at Darlington. Looks really good, a throwback Jeff Gordon, but it's not enough for me to want to play him. $10,100. He did hit the wall in qualifying. They were afraid he's going to have to go to the rear. As of right now, looks like he's going to be good to go. His team did tweet out that they should be good. Problem is, in practice, he was P20 in the 5-lap, P18 in the 10, and while he has had some solid runs in Darlington, I would just much rather get to the other drivers we talked about that have more dominant upside. I just think he's going to be kind of stuck in that P8 to P12 range for the majority of the day.
Then we got Kyle Busch, who's starting fifth, 9,100 over on DraftKings, 12,000 over there on FanDuel. And Kyle is he's on baby watch, but he's racing today, which, obviously the backup driver is in the pool on DraftKings. That's something we got to pay attention to as we get closer to lock. But as of right now, Kyle Busch is racing today.
Yeah, and there's a situation where if he happened to jump out of his car during a pit stop and Trevor Bayne went into the car, the points will still accrue for Kyle Busch. It's not going to be where you can play Trevor Bayne to try to get some sneaky points. Please do not do that. It's going to be directly to Kyle Busch's points today. But yeah, as of right now, we have no idea if he's going to finish the race or not. As of right now, he said that he is going to plan on racing today, and it sounds like even if they are going to have the kid, he might end up missing it just to race. So I think we should be good to go for Kyle Busch. I do think the JGR cars are in a solid spot today. He was P20 in the 10 lap, which I don't like, was P3 in the 5. But Kyle Busch being under $10,000 starting up front, I think you have to have some interest because of how good he's been so far this year. And plus, it's Mother's Day, baby narrative might be something to it.
We always look for that narrative when it comes to NASCAR DFS. Then we got the man who's starting in 8th, Ross Chastain, 9,700 on DraftKings, 11,500 on FanDuel. You brought up a really interesting point this week where you said, we love to look at data in terms of, how they do last year, 2 years, 3 years, but with this next gen car and the way Ross Chastain has been driving this year, a lot of that stuff has gone out the window.
Yeah. And I honestly think that Chastain does not have near the name value of a guy like Denny Hamlin or Truex, but honestly, if he was priced above them this weekend, close to $11,000, I would say that's probably deserved. Like Chastain has arguably been the best driver so far this year. The data set that I'm looking at this weekend, he's averaging the most DraftKings points brace. He has the most top 5, so doesn't have a win in this data set. But he's been get up front, dominate, contend for a win at any single track type, super speedways, road courses, short tracks, intermediates. Doesn't really matter. I think this track sets up well for Ross Chastain. He's starting in 8th. I'm hoping the price bump keeps some people away from him. Not sure it'll keep a lot of people away from him, but he's definitely one of the top dominator potential guys on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, he's someone every week just goes out there and continues to see him up there in the leaderboards. Then we got Alex Bowman. He's starting 15th, 9,600 on DraftKings, 9,500 over there on FanDuel. So a little bit of place differential there for Alex.
Yeah, he's in a similar spot to William Byron, in my opinion, where I'm just not really that interested. Practice it's not terrible, but P13, P14, P9. At nearly $10,000, we need Alex Bowman to get up front and have the potential to dominate. I don't really see that happening today. Back in 2020, with the COVID year, Bowman started out really strong at the couple of Darlington races, but starting in 15th there, don't really think he's going to get up front. And if he gets a P8, that's fine, but that's not going to be anywhere near optimal as far as DraftKings or FanDuel goes, unless he happens to pick up a ton of fast laps, which I don't really see happening.
Then we got Ryan Blaney. He's starting 7th, 9,400 over on DraftKings, 10,500 over on FanDuel. And a significant difference when we're talking about in terms of he's being, we're projecting him being much higher owned than, say, an Alex Bowman.
I think that's for a good reason. I think he's got a better chance to get up front and dominate. Now, Ryan Blaney does not have the track history at Darlington and some other drivers do, which is going to keep some people to shy away from. Although with the next gen car, I haven't really cared about track history too much so far this year. And if you were using track history, you wouldn't have played Blaney at Richmond, which he led 120 laps and had a very good race. So I'm not going to be overly concerned about track history. The thing is, I have a hard time seeing him get in front of guys like Kyle Busch, Truex, Larson at the beginning of this race. He had a fast car in practice, was P2 in the 10 lap, P5 in the 5. The price is nice. He's been fast this year, very, very fast, but I'm going to be a little bit underway. I'd rather allocate my exposure to some other dominators that I think have better potential to get up front.
And speaking about dominators, that's where Joey Logano comes into the equation, starting on the pole, 9,200 on DraftKings, 10,000 over on FanDuel. And, obviously we talked about the dominator potential that you have with Kyle Larson, of course, the most expensive driver. Well, you can spend almost $2,000 less and get to Joey Logano.
Yeah, Logano is a very interesting, like a case study this weekend and the price is amazing. It's really hard to argue a guy $9,200 for a 300 lap race starting on the pole, and he was P1 in the 5 lap in practice and P1 in the 10 lap. My only concern is that as far as the long run went, he fell off quite a bit. He was P11 in the 15, and we also have the competition caution on lap 30. And as we always know, things can really get shuffled out after the competition caution. So for me, I am planning on being a little underweight to Joey Logano, despite the numbers looking all very solid. I got a feeling he's going to lose that lead. I don't think he's going to lead over like 50 plus laps today. Like I think there's a strong chance he can lead up until the competition caution. So it's going to look really good early on. But once he gets out of clean air, I think it's going to be a struggle for Logano, especially if what we saw in practice happens during the race where the tire is going to fall off and he's not going to be as fast.
Then the final driver in this upper tier would be Tyler Reddick. He's starting 10th, 9,000 over DraftKings, 8,800 over on FanDuel. Are we approaching dominator stats potentially with Tyler Reddick?
Yeah, I like Tyler Reddick a lot today. I think this is a good. I think there's about as good a shot as ever for him to get his first career Cup win. I'm liking Reddick quite a bit today. P3 in the 10 lap in practice, P4 in the 5 lap. This is a track that suits him very well. He can ride around the wall, which it's always a little bit risky because he could always tag the wall and he gets a flat and ruins his day. But man, it is not. Oh, that's my train of thought for a second. It's a really good spot for Tyler Reddick here. I mean, $9,000 while the price is up there a little bit, and he was terrible last weekend. I think the upside's there for a top 3 and potential race win.
Of course, I mentioned about that top driver tool. And if you're not an Awesemo Plus member, you've never been an Awesemo Plus member, we've got a hell of a deal going on for you right now where you can get 7 days of Awesemo Plus Platinum for just $7. That's 77% off our usual weekly price. We use the promo code Luca at checkout, or simply click the link in the video description below to claim your 7 for 7 right now. This will give you access to everything we have to offer every DFF sport, including player projections, ownership projection, NBA boom bust tool, lineup builders, and so much more. With the NBA winding down, if you're looking to get started with MLB DFS, this is a great opportunity to take advantage. We also have our all new F1 projections, USFL, tennis, soccer, and almost any DFF sport out there. We have some tools for you to help you get that edge you need. That's $7 for 7 days of Awesemo Plus Platinum with promo code Luca at checkout, or just click the link below to activate. Again, this offer is for new Awesemo Plus users only. And of course, always highly recommend adding Fantasy Cruncher to your account. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. I know looking at some of the MMA contests, seeing those Awesemo avatars leading the leaderboard there. Yes, congratulations to everyone that was able to use the tools that we have over here at Awesemo.com, and just an amazing deal we have. You got to take advantage of that one. Now let's go into the mid tier. So this will be the drivers who will be the 8K and 6K range. So we got Kevin Harvick, Austin Dillon, Christopher Bell, Chase Briscoe, Brad Keselowski, Daniel Suarez, Eric Jones, Eric Amarola, Kurt Busch, Austin Cindric, Chris Buescher, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Bubba Wallace, Cole Custer, and Daniel Hemrick. Kevin Harvick, 8,800 over on DraftKings, 9,000 over on FanDuel. I mean, obviously, it comes that same situation with the question with Chase Elliott. Is a cash versus GPP question really tough to avoid Kevin Harvick in cash?
Yeah, if it's cash games, there is no question about it. If you're not playing Kevin Harvick in cash, you're really just hoping for him to have a mechanical issue within the first few laps, because there's a good chance he's going to be in a cashing lineup in cash games. As far as tournaments go, I would be more reluctant to play Kevin Harvick in tournaments than I would Chase Elliott, because if you're playing Chase Elliott in tournaments, you're making a bigger decision. You're kind of bypassing a potential dominator like a Truex, like a Hamlin, or a Kyle Busch up top. For Kevin Harvick, he's just a mid-range guy. You can easily fit him in alongside 2 dominators up top. He's amazing at Darlington, 3.3 average finish, 2 wins, 5 top 5s the past 6 races here in the top 10 each and every single time. Harvick has not been flashy this year. He's been very good, but he hasn't been flashy. But you do not need flashy sub 9K starting in 35th. Unless he has a mechanical issue, I would say there's a very small chance he's not in the optimal today.
Yeah, when I look at when this race starts, I look at my cash lineups. If I don't see like 100% Kevin Harvick, I'll be surprised.
Right.
It's hard to not get there because of, where he's starting at and the price point here. Next up, we got Austin Dillon. He's starting 14th, 8,500 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel.
So someone brought up a good point to me where everyone likes Tyler Reddick today. Well, no one's talking at all about Austin Dillon, his teammate. And if you assume that Tyler Reddick's going to be fast, you have to assume RCR as a whole is going to be fast today, which Darren Sue has Austin Dillon. The thing is, his price got bumped up to $8,500. Had a terrible week last weekend. So people have a bit of a sour taste in their mouth after that, which I understand. But he's pretty good at Darlington, 11.5 average finish, has 3 top 10s here the past 6 races. I just don't really like the price point too much. It's a little bit easier to stomach over on FanDuel at $7,800. But if you were playing tournaments, no one's really talking about Austin Dillon. If you think Reddick's going to be fast, you have to assume Dillon's going to be a top 10 contender.
Yeah, and then we always talk about, no matter what DFS sports out there, about getting leverage on the field. I mean, Austin Dillon would be great leverage on the field just by how we're projecting what his ownership's going to be and what he potentially could do there. Next up, we got the man who'll be starting third, Christopher Bell. He's 8,300 on DraftKings, 8,500 over there on FanDuel.
Yeah, Christopher Bell's a tough one this weekend. Obviously, he was very slow in practice. P24 in the 5 lap, P29 in the 10 lap, P12 in the 15. I hate the starting spot. I wish the price was a little bit lower. I'd rather get the Kurt Busch, who's $1,000 cheaper, starting 3 spots further back. I have about 8 to 10% Christopher Bell today, just because I like the other JGR drivers. And if that's the case, I don't think Christopher Bell can be that bad. Practice was definitely concerning for me. Doesn't have the greatest career at Darlington. The 20 car, though, I will say, back in the day, has always been good here at Darlington, especially with Eric Jones. But Bell's probably someone I'm not going to get to a lot of today.
Next up, you have got Chase Briscoe. He's starting 13th, 8,100 over on DraftKings, 7,500 over there on FanDuel. Another guy that not expected to see high ownership here.
Yeah, I think he's a good tournament play. He's starting P13, so he's going to get a bit overlooked, but he's kind of like Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain, where he's surpassed expectations this year. And I feel like I see that every single week, but Chase Briscoe's got legit top 10, top 8 upside. He was P3 in the long run in practice, P7 in the 10 lap. I wouldn't forget about it. I know he's going to be kind of low owned today, but I think he's someone to get a little bit of leverage on, because a lot of people are going to be pretty top heavy in their lineups today. And then that means you have to get down to the 6 and 5K range a lot. So don't forget about some of these mid-range plays, especially with Kevin Harvick right there. He's going to soak up a lot of ownership. There are some decent pivots if you don't want to go all in on the place differential.
Next up, there you got Brad Keselowski. He is starting 23rd, 7,900 on DraftKings, 6,500 over on FanDuel. I mean, we talk about this every week of your thoughts about Brad when we're talking about whether it's a super speedway or a non-super speedway of kind of, but we have seen Brad come up with some surprising performances.
Yeah, on DraftKings, he's kind of tough for me to get to at nearly $8,000. I think he's a much better play over on FanDuel at only $6,500. Starting 23rd, though, you do have a bit of a safety net. P18 in the 5 lap in practice, P10 in the 15, P17 in the 10. I think he will gain some positions, but over on DraftKings, I don't think it's going to be enough for him to be in the optimal lineup unless he's picking up fast laps, which is not something I'm really projecting today.
Daniel Suarez, he's starting 20th. He's $100 cheaper than Brad, 7,800 on DraftKings. But a difference over on the FanDuel side of the equation, where Brad was only 65, Suarez is 82.
Kind of swap for me, where I don't like Brad Keselowski much on DK, but I like Suarez over on DK FanDuel. And for him and Keselowski are kind of swapped there because he's about $2,000 more expensive. But I am expecting him to have a better car for this one. P9 in the 5 lap in practice, P8 in the 10 lap. I can trust Trackhouse Racing, I think, a little bit more than I can RFK so far this year. So I think Suarez is a pretty solid play. If I like Chastain, I know obviously Suarez doesn't have quite the upside, but I do think he could be a top 15, top 12 contender.
By the way, if you do have any questions about those drivers, if you leave those in the chat, I will bring them up here in the show. Next up, we got Eric Jones. He is starting 11th, 7,700 over on DraftKings, 7,200 on FanDuel.
So I like Jones a lot heading into the weekend. I believe I put him on the top 5 videos for the Awesemo on Friday. But the thing is, he qualified pretty high starting P11. In practice, wasn't super impressive from him, going 22nd in the 5 lap and also 22nd in the 10 lap. I was hoping to see a little bit more out of him. He's got decent track position to start with, and the 2 higher tire wear tracks we've been at so far this year with Auto Club and Dover. He finished 10th place last weekend, and then 3rd Auto Club, where he had one of the best cars in the entire field. So I think just because of that, I will have some exposure to Jones in tournaments. But at nearly $8,000, I really wish he was starting a little bit further back.
Then we got Eric Amarola, who's starting 12th, 7,500 on DraftKings, 5,800 over on FanDuel. So $200 less than Eric Jones, starting 1 spot back.
Yeah, if we're talking DraftKings, I'd much rather get to Eric Jones. I just think there's a little bit more upside. And he's really good at Darlington. I forgot to mention that, but Jones was one of the best drivers at Darlington back when he was in the 20 car for JGR. But over on FanDuel, I like Amarola, sub 6K. He's starting 12th, so I realize there's not a ton of upside there. He was P8 in the 15 lap over in practice. But at $1,500 on FanDuel with place differential not being as important, if he can just finish around 12th to 14th, that's not a terrible day at his price point. But over on DK, I'm not getting to a lot of them.
By the way, just kind of give some updates here. Green flag will be at 3:42 p.m. Eastern time. Competition caution at lap 30. Hamlin, Harvick, Elliott, and McLeod to the back for unapproved adjustments. So just to throw that out there. But when you look at some of those names are already in the back anyway, so it really doesn't mean much there. Next up, we got Kurt Busch. He's starting 7,300 on DraftKings, 8,000 on FanDuel.
Kurt Busch might be one of my favorite tournament plays on the slate today. I think he's just extremely underpriced over on DraftKings. He should be around the $8,000 mark. I think he should be above Brett Keselowski, probably above Eric Almirola. I think we're getting a nice discount here on FanDuel. A little bit different, $8,000. But starting in 6th, that is going to scare some people away. But he is a very good driver at Darlington. And with the way Darlington is, the veteran drivers typically do have a bit of an advantage. We know Kurt Busch is up there in age, 4 top 10s at Darlington the past 6 races. And he's pretty good at the high tire wear tracks. Did have a decent run at Auto Club early in the season where he finished 8th, finished 1st at Old Atlanta last year when it was still a high tire wear venue, and finished 6th in the most recent race at Darlington. So I think the upside's there for him. Now, is he going to be a big place differential guy? No, we're just kind of hoping he holds his position and picks up some fast laps here and there, but I definitely think that is possible at a low price point.
Then we got Austin Cindric. He started 19th, 7,100 on DraftKings, 6,200 over there on FanDuel. Decent tournament play?
Yeah, the thing is, it's kind of the opposite of Kurt Busch, where I said the veterans typically have a bit of an advantage off of Cindric, a rookie. So a lot could go south. He could certainly earn his Darlington stripe early on and kind of hurt his day overall. But I do like him as a play. FanDuel, he's way too cheap at $6,200. DraftKings, I think he's still a little bit too cheap. He's starting P19. The Penske cars were fast in the short run on practice. We'll see how that holds up over the long run, but he was P2 in the 5 lap and P9 in the 10. Starting 19th, I definitely think there's some top 12, top 15 upside at a good price point.
Then we got Chris Buescher starting 18, 6,900 over on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I like Buescher as a pivot off of Ricky Stenhouse, who should pick up some higher ownership starting in 26. That's priced right below him. We'll talk about him in a second. But he's got a couple of top 10s here at Darlington. He finished 8th at Dover last week and had a very strong race. Finished 9th place at both Darlington races last year. I just basically like him as a pivot off of Stenhouse, and really not much more to it. I think the price is fine. I like Vetri last week and obviously had track position to start with. Now starting 18th, it's a little bit tougher for him, but I do think he could knock on the door for a top 15.
Yeah, and of course, you mentioned about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He's starting 26, 6,700 on DraftKings, 6,000 on FanDuel. This is a guy that, I mean, look, if you're used to NASCAR DFS, you kind of know the risk and reward with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And last week was a boom week for Ricky Stenhouse getting 58 DraftKings points.
Yeah, I'm kind of scared to bet on 2 boom weeks in a row, but I do like him here. I didn't like him last weekend. That was a big surprise that Stenhouse ran that well. But the 2 high tire wear tracks we've had this year, Auto Club, he finished 10th place, and at Dover, he finished 2nd place last weekend. Those are like his 2 only good races of the season. So if the trends continue at a high tire wear track at Darlington this week, it should be in line for a good race. I mean, his numbers at Darlington aren't super impressive. He just have 3 top 20s. But in practice, he was P6 in the 10 lap and P10 in the 5 lap. He's starting 26. He's below 7K. I'm unfortunately getting to a lot of Stenhouse today.
And you don't feel good about it.
Not at all. Never do.
No, I mean, look, you never feel good when you got Ricky, because you just know what in the back of your mind, you know. Oh, yeah. Next up, we got Bubba Wallace. He started 17, 6,500 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. Can you make a case for Bubba in tournaments?
You can make a case just because of the fact he's going to be lower owned than Stenhouse, but at the same time, I just hate rostering Bubba Wallace. I wish we had more PD upside starting P17. He's a similar play to Chris Buescher, but I'd personally rather just get the Buescher. If you're looking at what he's done so far this season, Bubba at the higher tire wear tracks, 16th at Dover, 19th at Auto Club. It's not terrible, but starting at 17th, I'd like a little bit more upside. I'm fine getting to some sprinkles of Bubba in tournaments, but that's just about it.
Next up, you got Cole Custer. He's starting 28th, 6,300 on DraftKings, 5,000 over on FanDuel.
He's in a very similar spot to where he was last weekend. Similar price, similar starting spot. He was also bad in qualifying, bad in practice like he was last weekend. Went a lap down early on, dug himself out of a hole, ended up having a very solid race, finishing 15th, finished 11th at Auto Club earlier in the season, and finished 11th in the most recent race at Darlington. I mean, at $6,200, I think he's a pretty solid play over on DraftKings or FanDuel. Both price points are nice on both sides.
And then you got Daniel Hemrick. He's starting 24th, 6,100 on DraftKings, and the bare minimum over on FanDuel at 2,500.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why he's the bare minimum on FanDuel over there. He's kind of reminding me of his teammate Justin Haley, where he was $2,500 last weekend on FanDuel, and Haley kind of smashed last week, and he was in the optimal lineup over on DraftKings. I can't remember if he made the optimal over on FanDuel, but he was a good play nonetheless, contended for a top 12. And I mean, at GK, Hemrick's fine. He finished ninth at Auto Club earlier in the season, which is another high tire wear track. But over on FanDuel, if you're in a pinch for salary, Hemrick is about, I'd say, like close to two-ish $1,000 too cheap. And I like that value a lot because you can fit in a lot of studs if you go with Daniel Hemrick.
And of course, this is the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock show to get you ready for today's Goodyear 400. We are sponsored by Prize Picks. Of course, get 1 free month of Also Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and play over at Prize Picks. You get an email within 24 to 48 hours how you can take advantage of that free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Of course, when you sign, make that deposit, use that promo code Awesemo for instant first match deposit of up to $100. And looking at the props that we have over at Prize Picks today on this NASCAR slate, there's 2 guys that have stuck out to you when it comes to their fantasy score, being Ross Chastain and Tyler Reddick.
Yeah, I'm just a huge fan of them for DFS today. I think this track sets up very well for them. Both had strong cars in practice. I believe Chastain's props currently sitting at 44.5. I have him about 9 to 10 points higher. Gave him an 8th place finish this weekend and 17 dominator points. If Chastain does what he typically does and what he did last weekend, I think that should be an easy over. Now, it's never easy hitting the overs on Prize Picks, but I think he's in a pretty good spot. And the same can be said for Tyler Reddick. I would not be surprised if he has his breakout where he wins the race and dominates. He can ride around the wall. As long as he doesn't tag the wall, I think he's in for a pretty good day. Got him for around 50 fantasy points.
Yeah, of course, his number currently sits at 46.5. And of course, as I mentioned, get 1 free month of Also Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and play over at Prize Picks. We'll get an email within 24 to 40 hours of how you can get your free month of Also Plus Platinum. Of course, you got to check out all the props they have there for NASCAR, NBA, MLB. They've got everything over there at Prize Picks. Now let's look at the lower tier options. This will be the drivers who are underneath 6K. So we got Justin Haley, Harrison Burton, Michael McDowell, Todd Gillian, Ty Dillon, Landon Castle, Corey LaJoy, JJ Yelly, BJ McLeod, and Cody Ware. Justin Haley starting 29th is one of the drivers down this range we are seeing getting some ownership.
Yeah, I like Justin Haley quite a bit. He finished 23rd at Auto Club early in the season and then had a great race last weekend at Dover, which is a pretty similar track to Darlington with his 11th place finish. Obviously, had track position to work with to start this race, and that's not going to be the case today where he's starting in 29th, but below 6K for a driver that's got top 20 upside. Not many other great plays in this price range. I'm liking Haley a lot.
Then you got Harrison Burton. He started 25th, $200 cheaper than Haley at $5,700 over on DraftKings, $4,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, so Burton was on his way to burning all of us last weekend. By some miracle, he ended up getting back on the lead lap and finished 24th. I'm not sure how he did it, but I will take it. I won't complain. Starting P25 here, I feel like he's kind of maxed out where he's going to finish. I don't mind getting to some sprinkles, but he doesn't stand out to me.
Then next up, we have got Michael McDowell, who's starting 16th, $5,500 on DraftKings, and then $4,000 over on FanDuel. You brought up an interesting point about Michael McDowell. We're talking about drivers who are down here in this range. Is he one of the safer options?
It's tough because outside of Justin Haley, I'm not really in love with any of these plays. And the thing is, Michael McDowell was in a similar spot last weekend where he's starting pretty close to the front, so it's not like you really want to play him too much. But at the same time, he was able to hold his position and finish 17th last weekend at Dover. And could he possibly do that again? I don't really think it's going to be something likely where he finishes around the top 15. But having track position has been important in these races this year. Michael McDowell, his price point, I think is at least worth some chances in tournaments to get there, but it's not going to feel great. And it doesn't project as well.
Then you got Ty Dillon starting 21st, $5,100 on DraftKings, $4,000 on FanDuel.
Similar spot to McDowell, where he's starting a little bit further up than where I would like him to. He finished 27th at Dover last weekend, 17th at Auto Club, which was nice. You're only playing him because of the price point and just the fact that there's not really that many great 5K plays. Just try to differentiate down low.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the final 5 drivers down here, do you want the chalk Corey LaJoy?
I think I'm going to have to in some lineups to fit in Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott. I know Phil's been talking about Corey LaJoy all day on Twitter, and it's tough because, starting 30th, but he was 30th in the 5-lap in practice, was 21st in the 10-lap. And LaJoy held his own last weekend. He actually had a very strong race, but again, at the same time, he has some track position to work with. He does not have that luxury this weekend. I do think he's underpriced personally. Over on DraftKings on FanDuel at 4K, I don't think I could get there. But if you're in a pinch for some dominators, I don't mind getting some LaJoy down low.
And now, as we look at the betting side of this race here, Kyle Larson, the favorite to win this race, looking at plus 500. You mentioned about Tyler Reddick as potentially maybe he gets the first one here, plus 1400.
Yeah, I actually like that quite a bit. I mean, it's a bit of a long shot. It's not super long, but I mean, if there's a race for Tyler Reddick to win outside of Homestead this year, I think this is a good spot at Darlington.
I mean, you mentioned about how good Ross Chastain's been driving this year. He's plus 1200.
Yeah, I love the duo of Reddick and Chastain today, whether it be DFS, prize picks, betting to win. I mean, they're just really popping off the page to me for sure.
Of course, if you got any questions, line those up in the chat here for the next 15 minutes or so. We'll be answering your questions. Let me first go over to Discord from Jets World. A 2v2 situation for a high dollar single GPP on DraftKings. Cindric and Suarez or Chastain and Dillon.
Oh, if it's a single one, I gotta have to go with the Chastain side. I didn't realize. I'm assuming Ty Dillon.
Yes.
Yeah, even though Ty Dillon really lacks any upside at all, Chastain's ceiling is much higher than the other combination that he can.
Yeah. Is Reddick a good pivot from Logano or giving up too many projected points?
No, for me, I have them projected somewhat similar. I realize Logano's got an easier path to dominate starting up front, but I really do think Reddick can make some noise. Maybe not in stage one, but he should be able to work his way to the top 5 and be a contender the second half.
You know, someone was asking about the top 5 plays for today. I think it becomes are we playing cash or GPP? I'm going to guess that was a GPP question more than anything else. And so then I think it kind of becomes I think first off, for me, that question starts with, okay, what 2 dominators am I starting my lineup with?
Yeah, if I'm just sorting by like point per dollar plays, the top 5 for me, it's Kyle Larson, Kevin Harvick, Elliott, Reddick. And then you can make a case for it either being Justin Haley or like a Ricky Stenhouse down low.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question is, because you name some high price guys there.
Right.
It becomes that point of, okay, if I want to try to get 3 or 4 drivers who are 8,500 and above, how low are you going to have to go?
Yeah, if you're going that route, you can fit in Larson and Elliott together with a Kevin Harvick, and you don't really have to dip down to the Corey LaJoie range unless you're fitting in another mid-range guy, potentially like let's say maybe an Austin Dillon or Daniel Suarez. If you go that route, Cole Custer, Justin Haley, you can make a lineup with Haley being your lowest price driver within those 3. But you got to keep in mind, though, that's pretty stars and scrubsy. And if you happen to go with like a Elliott, Logano instead of a Larson, it definitely gets a lot more flexible.
But you brought up the point earlier in the show when we were talking about, the Larson, Elliott, Harvick type discussion is, if Kyle Larson just goes out there and just dominates this entire race and he just racks up so many of these dominator points, you may not need those huge place differentials.
Yeah, that's certainly the case. If Larson comes out as the main dominator, it depends on what the other drivers do. Because if Truex happened to be a secondary main dominator, leads about maybe not half the race, but maybe a third of it. That's probably we're not going to see Chase Elliott be in the optimal lineup. But if we just see one main dominator like a Logano or Larson just taking off, that's where it kind of puts the place differential guys back in play as far as the tournaments go, because Elliott is not going to have to get up front and dominate to outscore a guy like Truex. Let's say Truex rides around P3, P2 all day. That's fine. But if Elliott's going to ride up to P6, he's going to be easily one of the best plays in the slate if there's no secondary dominator.
Next up, this will be for a single entry 2,000 player contest, 2v2, Larson and Reddick or Elliott and Logano.
I'm going to start with the Larson and Reddick side. Ever since this race was on the calendar of the season, I was like, I'm going to play Larson. I'm going to play Reddick at Darlington. I'm going to stick with it. Everything looks good for them this weekend. I love the upside for those 2.
Next up, smaller DraftKings single entry. Is fading Chase Elliott too risky?
It's not too. I think it'd be more risky to fade Kevin Harvick because he definitely stands out in that mid-range. Thing is, up top, there's other guys that could easily outscore Chase Elliott. While he's a fantastic play on paper and the projections love him, you could easily pivot to a Denny Hamlin, a Martin Truex, a Kyle Busch that could rack up dominant points, which is something Chase Elliott's going to be kind of hard to come by. Maybe by stage 3 he gets up front, but for a good portion of the race, he's going to be working his way towards the front.
Clint went over to score, says, he goes, am I quote unquote reaching for going over 27.5 fantasy score for Kurt Busch on Prize Picks?
He was actually one of the guys I almost mentioned to you to bring up during the show. And I'm kind of glad he asked that question because I do like Kurt Busch a lot. I mean, 27 points. I have him for low to mid 30s as far as the projections go, which would be the over on Prize Picks. For him to hit 27.5 points, Kurt Busch would have to finish better than 11th, which is something he's done for the past 6 times here at Darlington. So I definitely like the over on 27.5.
Next up, question coming in from Discord. Hamlin to the rear. That's making him a bad play now. I'm overweight with that ownership.
He was already mid-pack. Now, it's not like he was in the very back like Chase Elliott, so it does hurt him a little bit. But the thing is, you weren't playing Denny Hamlin to dominate stage 1. He can't dominate stage 1. He's got to work his way through the field. It takes a little bit longer now. The competition caution should help him out a bit. He's still going to be fast. Dropping to the rear is not going to just completely change his car, so I don't really have any concerns with him going to the rear. And in fact, if you're overweight in tournaments, it's probably a good thing he went to the rear because it's going to keep some people off him a little bit.
Of course, so we got about 15 minutes here left in the show. Of course, coming up after us will be NBA Live before lock to get you ready for today's NBA playoff game. So stay tuned for that. Of course, if you're not subscribed, also right here on YouTube, be sure to do that. Hit that notification bell so you know when a show is live here on the channel. We're here for you every day to help you guide your way through how to make those winning lineups. Move on to the next question. Reddick and Stenhouse or Ware and Larson?
As much as I like Larson, I can't advocate for playing Ware no matter the circumstance. So it's gonna be the first one.
Yeah, I mean, it just I like look. I think the Reddick Stenhouse side of that is just oh god, I can't believe I'm gonna say this. It's a safer option. I just don't feel like I should ever say safer and Stenhouse in the same sentence.
Yeah, and Reddick's the same way because Reddick's the guy that has a big ceiling. But he also has a lot of issues during the race where he can just tag the walls. So while it feels weird to call them safer, the overall projection on them feels a bit better.
Yeah, it's one of those things for me with Kyle Larson today of just kind of like you feel good about just plugging him in your lineup and saying, you know what, feel confident about that. To me, it just becomes of, okay, what does the rest of your roster construction look like when you have a guy, it's 11,000 on DraftKings and 14,000 on FanDuel.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you're going with Larson and he does not come out and dominate, and you have Cody Ware in addition to him, that lineup is dead. Tyler Reddick, even if he doesn't have an elite day, if he has a good day, you're not dead with that lineup, and same with Stenhouse. For the Larson and Ware combination, there's a lot of risk there because obviously Ware's dead before the race even starts. So you're basically just hoping that Larson can come out and dominate. And if he does not have, the best of his capabilities of racing today, I mean, it's definitely the better side to me to go with the first one.
DraftKings question here: Custer or Haley?
I believe I have Custer slightly grading out better for me. It's a couple of points. I'm going to give a slight edge to Custer just because I feel I can trust the Stewart-Haas car a little bit more.
Any faith in Chris Buescher?
Yeah, I think Chris Buescher is a solid tournament play today. While he's starting 18th, and it's not going to look as good as Ricky Stenhouse, who he's priced right beside him. Now, obviously, you have Ricky Stenhouse with a much higher projection, and so do we as well as a whole in the site. It's just, Chris Buescher is a guy that can hold his ground. He's been good at the high tower tracks, good at Darlington. So, I think he's a good tournament play.
Next up, Jay Swift says, is Harvick optimal choice in your eyes?
Oh, for sure. Kevin Harvick is arguably the best play on the site today. Him and Chase Elliott always look amazing, but the thing is, Harvick is below $9,000. Great at Darlington. He's been pretty consistent this year, top 10 contender. The thing is, you don't need him to dominate today. Chase Elliott, you're going to need some fast laps mixed in there and maybe get a front for him to be optimal, depending on what the other drivers do up top. Harvick just needs to be within the top 10 at the end of the day. So I think it's a really easy path for him to be optimal.
Yeah, I also think when you were talking about that Harvick Chase Elliott conversation, it's just like, okay, if you spin down for Harvick, what does that then allow you to get to? What's the rest of your lineup look like to where, maybe that $1,500, $2,000 really gives you just a better over lineup where you're not having to get to, say, someone that's under $5,500.
Yeah, I can avoid the questions of having to wonder if we should get down to Cody Ware or not, which is something I would certainly not want to do today. So, if you can get from Cody Ware to he's $4,500. So if you could get up to a Daniel Hemrick or Justin Haley over that, I think it's the much safer route to go because I don't like playing the scrubs.
Logan goes, is 40% spin house too much in the DraftKings Minimax?
I'm honestly not too far away in my personal exposures. And while it feels like a lot, I don't hate it today because there's not a lot of amazing plays down low. And The numbers point to playing Stenhouse today. Obviously, they can go south quickly, but I've been a numbers-oriented guy, so it's just what I'm rolling with today.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of, looking at, where you have, I mean, with Stenhouse, gotta just call him Spinhouse again. Wreck House, there's a lot of names that have been thrown out there with him. It is like, I mean, look, if he can stay in this race and stay clean, it's kind of hard for him to say he doesn't end up in a winning lineup.
Yeah, the two similar tracks we've had this year, it's literally been his only two good races of the season, second at Dover and 10th at Auto Club. So, I mean, if the trends continue, it should be in line for a solid race. He had a top 12 car in practice. You don't need much at $6,700 starting in 26.
I mean, when you talk about that low end, where what's the lowest you want to go?
For me, it's LaJoy. I'm not sure why he's priced below Landon Castle. I get it, LaJoy's not in great equipment, but they should definitely at least be swapped. But $4,100 is too cheap. I know he's probably got like a 25th to 30th place car, but at least he presents you more upside than a Rick Ware car down low or whatever BG McLeod's in. It's just not. I mean, LaJoy, I think, is definitely the best option as far as going cheap. As far as what I really want to go as low as, it's basically Justin Haley.
In terms of some of these drivers that we're both expecting to have low ownership, is there someone that you look at and say, you know what, I want to get to that driver a little more? Is it someone like, say, a Kurt Busch, maybe?
It's exactly what was in my mind when you said it. So, yeah, I'm going to roll with that. Kurt Busch, starting 6. I mean, there's always been, every single week, there's a driver that kind of just slips by just in your mind when you're building lineups where you think they're just going to drop. And Kurt Busch could certainly be one of those guys. But as good as he is at Darlington, had a solid car in practice, his price is too low. And I think he can hang around that top 8, top 6 for the majority of the day.
Philip asking over on YouTube, Daniel Suarez or Ricky for FanDuel, is you had to choose one.
It's over on FanDuel. I believe I have, they're very close. I have them within a point. It's a slight lean to Suarez because I think he's got better finishing position potential.
Yeah, you just kind of looking at FanDuel, you look at that top 5% chance we have for Chase Elliott. It's really tough to avoid him today over on FanDuel.
Yeah, and the thing is with FanDuel is dominant points really aren't as important. You get 0.1 for a lap led, so that's why guys like Kyle Larson are going to grade out as well over there. Elliott and Harvick are darn near locks over on FanDuel because if they don't have issues or mechanical issues or anything, I mean, they're going to probably walk into the optimal.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of sit there. Is there a driver that you're really scared about today?
I'm kind of scared about Kyle Busch because we're not really sure what's going to happen with the whole baby narrative going on today. And if he happens to leave the race early on, I don't really think that's going to be the case. But it does concern me a little bit. I still have a lot of Kyle Busch, but I mean, it could certainly go south if other things are on his mind.
That to me becomes a wondering is once, this race locks, what does that ownership look like? Is it going to be a little lower than we expect? Because there may be people that say, you know what, I just don't want to take the chance.
Yeah, and if you're looking on DraftKings, he's got that big red Q reg we signed on, which you never ever see on for NASCAR purposes. So some people that only play NASCAR DFS are probably freaking out, wondering why there's a red Q right beside Kyle Busch's name, and they're wondering why Trevor Bain's showing up at I think it's like $7,000. So that might scare people a little bit off of him. I mean, he had a great race last weekend, which if he had no questionable tag or no baby issue, I feel like his ownership would be a little bit higher. It might drop it a few percentage points, but even then, that could be leverage to be had.
Yeah, it's never good when it's NASCAR or MMA. You see that red box on DraftKings, like it happened yesterday. I literally get the text. One fight falls out during the card. I'm like, son of a. Well, there went 3/4 of my lineups.
It's tough when it's all locks at the same time, unlike the other sports like football, NBA, and baseball.
Yeah, I mean, obviously NASCAR, you couldn't have a late swap. I mean, that's just not physical. But yeah, I've never understood in MMA why they don't allow late swap when fights all just start all at the same time. But yeah, it's that was one of the things of when I started looking at the slate, I was like, what's going on here? And then of course of research, I go, oh, okay, this all makes sense.
Right.
But of course, if you got any questions, just got a couple more moments here left here in the show. Next up says, if I'm playing Larson and Reddick, is Chastain too many dominators on DraftKings? Should I concentrate more on place differential on DK playing a high dollar single entry?
No, that's totally fine. I mean, those are three still on highest on drivers today. I mean, there's a strong chance those could be one. Those guys could be 1, 2, 3 for the majority of the race, picking up the dominator points, picking up the fast laps. And yes, you might be sacrificing a Harvick and Chase Elliott within that, but you can still get some other place differential drivers in your lineup down low, like a Ricky Stenhouse Jr., a Cole Custer. And just by not having Elliott and Harvick, you're going to be different enough, even though Reddick and Chastain and Larson are still picking up ownership.
Once this show's over, I'm finalizing my lineups, and I'm not sure what I'm doing with Ricky Stenhouse Jr.
We never are.
Yeah, never are. Let's see here. Kevin goes Elliott and Hemrick or Hamlin and Stenhouse for a GPP.
If it's GPP, I almost lean the Hamlin route. I mean, Hemrick's a fine play today, but I feel like Stenhouse has got the more upside, and Hamlin's got somewhat similar upside to Elliott today.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Elliott's obviously the driver that I feel the most comfortable with in terms of those four drivers, but I get it. I mean, look, I know I'm going to play Stenhouse today. I'm just not going to feel good about
it. Just got to accept the fact that it's probably not going to end right.
God, I hope it ends right.
Well, hopefully it doesn't end right into the wall. Hopefully.
Or watch it'll be is someone in front of him will wreck, and he'll be a casualty of the wreck.
Yeah, right when he's running top five. Exactly how it would go.
Yeah, that's the last thing that we want to see there. In terms of for our single entry players, I mean, obviously we've talked about the dominators and maybe is the way to potentially get different of go Logano as opposed to starting off your lineup with Kyle Larson.
Yeah, I think people are going to be scared off of that competition caution early on, which I know I kind of am. The thing is, Logano, I mean, he did fall off in practice from the he was P1 in the 5 and 10 lap, which is great. And then he went to P11 in the 15 lap. And I was listening to his interview after qualifying, and he didn't seem as enthusiastic about his car as I thought he was going to. They talked about how fast he was, and he said, yeah, I was in the ballpark as far as practice went, which as fast as he was, he thought he'd be a little bit more enthusiastic. So that was a little bit concerning for me. It's definitely, I mean, he's going to be high owned still, but I would personally rather get to the Larson thing. But if you rather go with Logano, you're saving around $2,000. So that could save you from having to go to the Cody Wares and the JG Elliots of the world. So it just depends on what the rest of your roster looks like. But I understand the case of wanting to go with Logano today.
Of course, we got some of these. I was just scrolling through Bob's, Twitter. He notes that all the Hendrick cars have a planned backup scheme, so you don't have to spend an extra hour or more wrapping the entire backup hole, also getting it ready to race.
Hendrick's prepared no matter what the situation is, whether it be fast in the race or just having some extra paint schemes.
In terms of the old school paint schemes, is there one that you like the best?
Speaking of Hendrick, William Byron's got a really nice one today. It's like Jeff Gordon throwback, and Jeff Gordon had some of the best paint schemes. I love it. But there's a lot of good paint schemes today.
Of course, lock here is coming up here. Green flag, 3:42 p.m. each time. We appreciate everyone checking out the Awesemo NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Of course, be sure to check out our sponsor, Prize Picks, and play some of the props got over there. So you got plenty of time to put in your lineup. Coming up next will be NBA Live Before Lock. It'll get you ready for today's NBA playoff games. Good luck with your NASCAR lineups today. We will talk to you next week right here on the NASCAR Live Before Lock show. Have a good day, everybody.